Hi guys, in my hand today I have 6 pens or pointing devices. They're not normal pens or pencils that I can write with on paper, but I can write with them on other things. 2 of them are from Apple, one's from Compaq, one's from Scion, one's from Microsoft and one's from Samsung. But what are they here for, what are they about and why is this Apple one so massively big? So part of the reason for this video is me seeing the recent Apple iPad adverts for the new iPad, and they're saying that it will work with the Apple Pencil 1. And got me thinking about Apple Pencil and pointing devices for digital devices. So if we think back before the iPad, we always used to use things like diaries. And diaries, you'd put down your agenda, what you're doing, where you're going, all that sort of stuff. That sort of led on to the filofax. I don't know if you remember the 80s and the yuppies, they had the filofax. And then the very early 80s, you had people like Sharp, Casio, people like that, making what they call digital diaries. And they were the sort of handheld diaries where you put all your details, all your notes on a little thing in your hand, and that would keep up to date everything you did. Now, of course, diaries haven't gone out of fashion, or notebooks. I mean, you still get them today, these things. Obviously, mine's a bit out of date, but, you know, you keep your notes of what you're doing and where you're going. But the idea was to make life a bit more simple. If you remember the filofax, it was a huge thing. It was enormous. Diary idea was to try and get something smaller and into your hand. And remember, this is a long time before mobile phones even. So the move on from the Sharp diary was to a thing called the Scion II. Scion made a thing called a Scion Organiser. That came out in 1986, and to be honest with you, it was only used by shops and businesses. It was an awful looking thing really, it was quite big. Now of course that led on to other companies wanting to bring out other type of devices. One of them was a Palmtop computer. If you remember the film Terminator 2, John Connor, who was the main sort of lead character throughout the films, he's the lead guy that saves the world, he had an Atari Portfolio Palmtop computer. Everybody wanted one at the time, but it was never successful.
Please insert your stolen card now. Pin number.
Will you hurry up? This is taking too long.
Go baby, go baby, go baby. Alright. Pin number 900.
Who'd you learn this stuff from anyway?
From my mom, my real mom, I mean. Withdraw 300 bucks. Come on, baby, come on, come on, come on. Yes!
Hey, it worked.
Alright, 7, 2, 5, 6. Yes!
Now I say never successful, it never really sold to the public as such, not in the UK anyway. I remember me and my mates all wanted one and thought it was the best thing ever because it was literally a Palmtop computer. And if you compared that to the size of laptops of the same age, laptops were enormous and this thing wasn't. But it was just restricted in what it did and the price it came in at. It was like a DOS-based system, so it didn't really take off. However, Scion later brought out the Series 3 in 1993. Which was more of a keyboard-based system with a screen. Still didn't have any use for any of these pens yet, we'll get to that in a minute. But it was a great little device, so it felt like a little computer, but it only did the set tasks that were built into it. Now, at the same time as the Scion III came out, or a bit later than the Scion III in 1993, Apple, yes, Apple, those who built the iPad, brought out a thing called the Apple Newton. And the Newton was a PDA device like none of the others you'd seen before. Remember, the Scion had a keyboard. Apple decided to do it without a keyboard and with the first, as far as we know, stylus. So the advert shows a quite portable device with a touchscreen. It's this thing here. It's not as portable as you would expect it to be, but it's still fairly small compared to a filofax, and it has a pen. The idea of this is you could write on the screen whatever you wanted to do in handwriting, and it would recognise your handwriting and turn it into text. It was a brilliant, brilliant device. Very, very clever. At the time, it was the only one of its kind. It took memory cards in the top. You could actually even get software for it, and it had its own built-in programs. But if you connected it up to an Apple computer, and I had an Apple Power Mac computer at the time, quite a big beige tower, you could actually plug this into that, download the software from that to this, and run it, do all sorts of things. Now, unfortunately, now, because it's been sitting in the loft for quite a while, it doesn't work anymore. I haven't used it for about 20 years. It just now goes black and does nothing, unfortunately. The nice thing about it at the time was you could run it on ordinary AA or AAA batteries, or you had a charger that came with it and a battery that came with it. So it was quite versatile, to be honest with you. And it even came with a case, but the case was about Filofax size. So the Apple device didn't really take off that well. They did a few versions of the message pad, then it just disappeared completely. Scion carried it on with the Scion Series 5, which then had a pen, this pen here. Quite big, to be honest with you, thin. This used to slot into the device, and then you could use this to operate the device. Around the same time as that came out, Palm brought out the Palm Pilot. Now the Palm Pilot didn't use a pen, it used your finger. It didn't do handwriting recognition as such onto the screen. At the Palm Pilot, it had a little thing at the bottom of the screen, a little area where you drew in the shape of a letter, and it had this, I can't remember the name of it, but it had this funny squiggly device thing where you squiggled and it worked out that that was a letter. The problem with that is you had to type a letter at a time. Now they brought out a few versions of the Palm Pilot, they upgraded it. The most popular one, and the one that we sold when I was selling them, was the Palm 3, which was a great little device, handheld, very small. They were much smaller than the Scion and definitely smaller than the Apple Newton. Big downside to these devices, and the devices I've shown you so far that ran right up into the 2000s and early 2000s, they're all black and white. They've all got monochrome screens. So that was rectified in 2000s by Microsoft and HP and compact manufacturers like that, and they brought out devices like this. This is a 2003 compact iPad. This is a colour-based system, so it's got a full colour screen, touch screen with a pen, very small and handy little pocket-sized device. This ran a version of Windows, so this is a Windows Pocket machine. Now, unfortunately, this one, again, I've had it a long time, it doesn't run on the battery anymore. The built-in battery, you couldn't even change it. Unlike the Newton, where you could take the battery out, this one you can't. It's a fixed battery in the unit, and it's dead. I mean, again, this thing hasn't been used for a good 15, 20 years. It will start on the little cradle that comes with it. So it came with a little cradle at the time that you could put it on to sort of dock it. So the advantage of this device, other than the fact that it's just got a colour screen, had more memory, had an SD card slot, which was more the norm then. I think it had 64 meg of memory at the time, and it's got things like, well, not a lot actually. Things it's missing: doesn't have Wi-Fi, doesn't have Bluetooth. Now a later version came out that did have Bluetooth, but the one I got doesn't even have Bluetooth. You could buy a Bluetooth card for it, went in the top, or you could connect it via the cables that I showed you to a PC, then connect that to the internet, which is a bit pointless because you want to disconnect it to the internet. So it was a bit strange. It did, of course, come with versions of Windows, so it had Windows software on it, like you had a version of Word, Outlook, Microsoft Messenger, and it looked very much like a Windows-based system. So along with Windows 95, Windows 2000, Windows Millennium, that sort of stuff, it had that sort of look to it, which was a very, very good thing at the time. You had decent colour pictures. You could use it as a day-to-day digital device to make your life easier, so you didn't have to do all the work. You get this sort of thing to do it. And again, still before decent colour mobile phones, and definitely before the Apple devices. The pen for the compact was also a tiny little thing, and it slotted into the device in the top, pushed in. So eventually Apple got in on the market, and Apple came into it in 2007 with the Apple iPod Touch. So it's an iPod, it's a music device, but they put apps on it, so maps, diary stuff you could use it like a Filofax, but it was your music player. Now most people still bought the smaller iPods, to be honest with you, but this was a revelation. It was a fantastic thing. So this was 8 or 16 gig as opposed to the smaller iPods, which were normally 1 to 8 gig. But it had apps. Didn't have a pen, no buttons either. This came out, as I said, early 2007, late 2007, the iPhone, the first iPhone came out. The iPhone did exactly the same thing, but made phone calls as well. But it was a bit thicker. The iPhone was much thicker than the iPod, the original iPod Touch. So the first iPad didn't actually come out over here until 2010. So I say it's first, it makes it sound like it means it's only, what, 12 years old? Doesn't seem very long at all, does it, when you think about it? But the iPad came out 2010, and then later on, I would say probably about 4 years ago, I think it was, that the iPads first came with a pen. And they decided to bring out a whopping great enormous thing, this thing. Now, the Apple Pen, I don't know why it's so big. It's massive. It's got a, there you go, it's got a lightning charger on top. And it's a chargeable pen. All the others were just pointing devices, didn't do much. But this wasn't the first of its kind. Samsung was one of the other pens I had in my hand, and Samsung brought out an S Pen sometime before this. And the Samsung S Pen is tiny. This is also a rechargeable pen, but it charges in its device, which is really, really good. So the Samsung one, the brilliance of the Samsung one was it's in the side of your tablet. There's this little slot there, pops out, and it's recharging in the tablet itself. Now, me personally, I still prefer the Samsung Pen over the Apple Pen, and there's the newer Apple Pen, of course, Apple Pencil 2. And they bought the Apple Pencils. Remember, the Apple Pencils only came out at first with the Apple Pro, so it's the 10-inch and the 12-inch iPads. If you had the smaller 10-inch device, now I've got a 10-inch Samsung, but the pen is still enormous compared to your device. The Samsung idea, with this tiny little thing that recharges in the device, is brilliant. It also has a button on it. So when you pull it out of the device, it gives you a little menu, and there's a little button on it to press it to get it to do various functions on the side. That didn't really have much of an effect on me because I didn't really ever use it for what it's supposed to be used for. Even though it's a multitasking tablet and the pen's quite handy, I ended up just doing junk. Eventually, other companies, which was one of the other pens I had, brought out similar things. So Microsoft for the Surface brought out the Surface Pen. Again, this is a rechargeable pen, but this one's slightly different in that this one actually has a battery in it. So your normal battery goes in your pen, and it's got a little button on the top to switch it on and off with the little stylus at the bottom. Quite a nice, this is sort of more normal writing pen device size. But all of these things came out after your pointers. If you remember back during the sort of the 2000s when you first got tablets, you had little pointers with little rubber ends on them. Bush, bush, bush. These did nothing other than just point in the right direction. They left a mess on your screen. They were very imprecise, but you could use it on a mobile phone as well. And that's the one thing, unless you get a Samsung S Pro phone, their phones still don't use pens. So your phone does everything now that your tablet does. So all your phone does, all your apps, all your stuff, your diary, all the stuff you would normally have done on a PDA or an iPad, but in a much smaller device. So an iPhone size, small iPhone like that, or Samsung's and the other phones do everything else. But then the iPad is supposed to take over from a computer, which is such a shame why the Atari portfolio never really took off. The only really sort of computer sort of thing I would say that took off for some time was the Microsoft Surface with its keyboard and its pen as well. But again, quite a bulky, large device. Now, some people want a big device, which is why I've got a 12-inch Samsung and a 10-inch Samsung because they're nice full-size screens. So my iPads are only mini-size, so they're quite small. So again, virtually, it is nearly pocket size. If you've got a big pocket, the iPad mini fits into a pocket quite well. Better than, say, the 10-inch Samsung or the 12-inch Samsung. Better than the Newton, because the Newton was massive. It was never really pocket-sized, even with its case, which made it big like a Filofax. This thing here. It was never really pocket-sized, unfortunately. The only ever pocket-sized pocket one was the Compact, and that's been replaced by phones. Today's mobile phones, you get a bigger screen, more memory, more functions, Bluetooth, wireless, GPS, all the other stuff that didn't have, you've now got in your mobile phone. So all of those devices, unfortunately, are sort of defunct, dead and buried. But over the history of time, they'll show that we moved from paper through electronics to end up with your mobile phones. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.